This is quite possibly my most anticipated movie of the year. The Green Knight is director David Lowery's kind of strange adaptation of the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Now, I am a pretty big fan of David Lowery's work, especially A Ghost Story. I still think that's one of the most underrated movies of the last decade, and I still recommend people to watch that. Like I said, this has been a really big anticipated movie for me because it was originally going to be released in May of 2020, but due to the COVID pandemic, it has been pushed back all the way to the end of July of this year. And like I said, The Green Knight is an adaptation of the tale about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Gawain is a young noble, nephew to King Arthur, who wants to prove himself honorable enough to become a knight. So when an otherworldly figure, the Green Knight, confronts Arthur and his friends on Christmas and challenges them, Gawain takes him up on that said challenge, given that he meets him again in a year's time to complete the challenge. Now, David Patel plays Gawain in the movie, and he proves himself to be one of the most talented actors of this generation. He doesn't take up a lot of roles, granted, but he does add a very obvious amount of quality to each role that he takes on. He's insanely watchable in these movies, and he's really good in this movie too. Now, to get probably the main talking point for this movie out of the way, this is not a traditional fantasy quest movie. This leans a lot more into Lowery's art house tendencies, which I think if people don't know his work or are expecting an action movie, they'll probably be disappointed. Even knowing his work, the movie wasn't really what I expected it to be, which, to be honest, is somewhat disappointing. I wanted to like this movie so much more than I did due to my incredibly high expectations. However, there are aspects about this movie that are absolutely great, and other aspects about the movie that I initially felt hesitant about, but have grown to like more as time has gone on, the more I think about it. Now, this movie basically feels like an epic poem. David Lowery's movies tend to have this kind of dreamlike flow to them, and that is very present here. Now, this movie is full of poetry, symbolism, and metaphors, and admittedly, I didn't understand everything that happened in the movie. The movie is incredibly layered in its storytelling and characters, and I'd love to see someone do an extensive video essay breaking everything down in it and explaining it, because I think that even if you didn't enjoy the movie, you'll still want to look into the story afterwards out of curiosity. And it is very much so a movie that makes you think about it afterwards. Now, the main thing the story seems to tackle is heroism. Gawain wants to be a hero, even though he doesn't really put in the work to do it, so when the opportunity arises, he basically has to pay for the consequences of his hastiness in his actions, given that his next confrontation with the Green Knight, which is what the movie leads up to, could be fatal. Even soon after his confrontation with the knight in the beginning, details of the encounter are recounted incorrectly, so the movie does also explore how tall tales are told and passed down, and heroes can be deified, as Gawain quickly does become in this movie, even though he hasn't really earned that. His quest can be seen as a coming-of-age story. He's trying to figure out who exactly he is, so his physical and mental journey take place at the same time. Lowery leans into his mental journey for the movie. Not everything is clear-cut and straightforward. Some scenes are intentionally confusing. Lowery is undoubtedly talented as a director and seems to know what he is doing when exploring these characters. The movie also looks incredible. There is a very distinct use of colors and its color palette in this movie that seem to coincide with Gawain's mental state throughout it. And like I said before, there is a lot of symbolism here, and this is easily Lowery's most visually striking movie that he's made so far. Other parts of the movie I also really liked were the costume and makeup design, along with the sound design, particularly surrounding the Green Knight. The acting is also very solid across the board. Alicia Vikander plays dual roles in this movie that probably symbolizes some form of Freudism and issues in Gawain's mind, and other standouts are Barry Keoghan and Ralph Ineson. Unfortunately, both of them are barely on screen in the movie and play the most charismatic roles in it. Einstein specifically is captivating to watch as the Green Knight. The sound design and the way he moves and used on his voice immediately grabs your attention. I really do wish he had more screen time in the movie. Now, like I said at the beginning, this movie was different than I expected it to be. For myself, I couldn't really get into it for the first 25 minutes or so until Barry Keoghan came on screen. And then after his character came on screen, I was on board for the rest of the movie. But those first 25 minutes really drug for me. And I think that that's going to be a situation for a lot of people watching this movie, is that it is very much so one that you have to get on the same wavelength as, or you're not going to enjoy it. And I wasn't able to get onto that wavelength until about 20-25 minutes into the movie. I myself was really hoping for more action in the movie than there was. I knew it wasn't going to have a lot in it, and with it being a movie made by Lowery and produced by A24, but I was hoping for a movie that was more straightforward in being a fantasy adventure, because I really like those movies. The movie is incredibly ambiguous at times, and I think that sometimes it leaves its audience behind. It goes through the normal tropes of meeting unusual characters on a quest, but whereas you usually expect a lesson learned from these encounters in a story like this, it more often leaves you wondering what the purpose of the encounter was in the first place. Now, I know a lot of people will enjoy that aspect of the movie. I don't necessarily want things spelled out for me, but I do think this movie could have used a lot more fleshing out for certain aspects of it, because, like I said, I do think that you do get a little lost watching it, and it would be a little bit easier to follow if it was a little bit more straightforward. I was hoping for this to be a more commercial movie from Lowery, because I really liked A Ghost Story especially, and was hoping for more people to get on board with him as a director. And I do think that the trailer is marketed to make it look more commercial than it really is, and that might just be misleading for some people. But overall, I did really enjoy this movie. Once I was able to get into it, I had a good time watching it, and the ending in particular, the last 10-15 minutes or so, are incredible. Now, I do have a hard time recommending this movie to anyone without them directly knowing what it is. If you're interested in it, I think you should check it out. If you're expecting an action movie, I think you will be disappointed in this movie. But if you are looking for an art house film, you'll probably like it a lot more. I do think that this was a really unique experience. It was probably the most unique experience I've had with a movie that's come out this year. And while initially it didn't quite meet my expectations and I was somewhat disappointed, over time I've come to appreciate it more, and I think that's kind of how it's going to be for a lot of people. The Green Knight is definitely an interesting movie, and like I said, a very unique experience. So I will be rating The Green Knight an 8.5 out of 10. Now, what did you guys think about it? What is your favorite Arthurian story adaptation? Let me know, and I'll be back with another video.